Hi, folks. Thank you so much for waiting. Apologies, I had a room mishap. I think Lucas is on the call if you wanted to
Yeah.
jump in, Lucas, and thank you
Hey,
so
Nita.
much.
No, that's fine. Thank you for your patience, everyone. Nita is from Acon. She will be leading this training session. Um, Nita is actually one of our core partners here at Metcash. She was actually instrumental in helping us get that R-Way bronze accreditation. Without saying too much, I'll just pass it over to you, Nita.
Perfect. Thank you. And apologies again, folks, for keeping you waiting a couple of minutes this afternoon. So my name is Nita. My pronouns are she, her, and I am Metcash's dedicated relationship manager here at Pride and Diversity. So for the next 60 minutes, I'll be spending time with you just going through LGBTQ plus awareness, which is a session really focused on correcting current terminology. Oh, I might just ask folks if they wouldn't mind going on mute. Thank you so much. Um, so today's session will be focused on correcting current terminology for the LGBTQ plus community and how to be a better ally, visible and vocal for the rainbow community. I would, of course, like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians of the beautiful country of which I'm dialing in from today, which is the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I pay my respects to elders past and present and would like to extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people attending today. I recognise that sovereignty was never ceded and that this always was, always will be Aboriginal land. And if you are on a laptop and you're able to pop in the chat where you're dialing in from, that would be great. I will have the chat function open today to answer any questions or queries you have throughout the session. So just a little bit about who we are. If you're based in New South Wales, you might have come across ACON in your travels. So ACON originally stood for the AIDS Council of New South Wales, and it is New South Wales' premier LGBTQ health organisation. While I'm chatting away, you might like to visit acon.org.au. That's ACON with a C, otherwise you're going to end up on a very different kind of website. Acon.org.au to get a feel for the breadth of programs that we offer to support the LGBTQ plus community. Pride and Diversity is then a division of ACON, and what we do is workplace inclusion. So I go into organisations such as yourself who are invested in Pride inclusion, who have Pride networks, or are wanting to start that journey and assist the organisation become a safer, more inclusive place for LGBTQ plus employees. Now, some of the content covered today might be a little bit sensitive. If at any point you need to step off the call, please take care of yourself first. I believe the call is recorded. Yes, it is. I can see the red dot up the top. The call is being recorded, so you can always catch up with the content at a later date. So, when we're talking about LGBTQ plus inclusion, I want to stress that inclusion requires action. If we're looking at the pyramid on screen here, there are three terms: tolerance, acceptance, and inclusion. If we're tolerant of someone's diversity, whatever it may be, we are aware of that difference or that diversity, but we're not really going out of our way to engage with that person, educate ourselves about their experience, or make them feel part of the whole. It's like keeping someone at arm's length. Acceptance is a bit better. Maybe we're having a conversation with that person, or maybe we are adjusting our language a little bit. But being inclusive really requires us to step out of our comfort zone at times, educate ourselves and upskill ourselves to make sure that everyone feels part of the whole. So, a little analogy I like to draw is, let's say we're hosting a barbecue and we and our carnivorous friends are getting together to throw some snags on the barbie. If we were being, so when we invited a friend who we know is vegan. So let's say in this scenario, the vegan friend is the minority. Now, if we were being tolerant of their veganism, that might look like, well, invited them, didn't I? They can come. It's not my fault they're vegan. They can bring their own food, but they're invited. That's being tolerant. Being accepting is probably more like having a conversation with that person along the lines of, hey, look, I'm hosting this barbecue on the weekend. I know you're vegan, and look, I think the salads are going to be okay, maybe the bread rolls, but probably still best you bring something. Whereas being truly inclusive would be more of a conversation and effort on your behalf. So if I was being really inclusive towards my vegan friend, I would probably say something like, hey, look, I'm hosting this barbecue on the weekend. I know you're vegan. Don't worry, I'm going to have plenty of options for you. Just bring yourself and whatever you feel like drinking on the day. And then I'm going to have to go to Woolworths and go down an aisle I've never ventured down before, and I'm going to be Googling how to marinate tofu. But my vegan friend is going to have a really exceptional experience and feel completely part of the whole. So I hope that explains a little bit better what I mean by being inclusive. I also hope I haven't scared you in this instance because being inclusive doesn't always require you to go to a shopping trip, but it does require a small amount of effort and education on your behalf. So, a little bit more about what inclusion is and what it isn't. So, being LGBTQ inclusive is really about behavior and not beliefs. What I mean by that is I'm not here to change anyone's personally held beliefs or values on LGBTQ plus identities. I only hope to provide awareness and education about the unique barriers and challenges faced by our community and to hopefully enable folks to work together more cohesively. There are many individuals and cultures and religions around the world who don't recognize and respect LGBTQIA plus identities. And I have the utmost respect for all, religions and cultures. However, how we treat each other at work, in particular, our behavior is really critical. And Metcash has a very firm anti bullying and harassment policy and a code of conduct that states that we must treat each other with equal respect no matter what our beliefs are. The Anti Discrimination Act, which protects Australians' sex recorded at birth, sexual orientation, and gender identity, that same legislation protects people's religious practices and cultural beliefs. It's a fantastic law that protects all of our beautiful diversities. And there's a common misconception that these two can't coexist, but they absolutely can. I think about, for example, at a previous employer, one of my very close friends was Muslim and she practiced Ramadan. I actually didn't really know a lot about Ramadan. I didn't know what that involved. And so I had a conversation with her and said, look, is there anything I can do to support you during this time? What's your day going to look like? Is there anything I can take off your plate? And we had this really great conversation where I learned about her faith and her cultural practices. And I became a better ally to her without me converting to Islam. And it's kind of the same thing with LGBTQIA plus inclusion training. I'm not here to recruit. I'm purely here to educate and raise awareness. Furthermore, this sort of training is not designed to raise one group above any other. While I will be focusing on the queer community, you absolutely can apply these allyship skills and self education skills to any minority or marginalized group. And while we're striving to create a safe and productive environment, we want to be very mindful not to make assumptions about people's sexual orientation or gender identity. So, what I mean by that is, while we're setting out to be better, more effective allies to the queer community, we don't want to fall into that or that pitfall of forcing people to come out. Creating an inclusive culture is about being an ally in general and being a safe place for if and when one of your colleagues or perhaps customers, depending on the role you're in with Metcash, feel comfortable to come out to you. And finally, and most importantly, inclusion is about calling out harmful behaviors. It's all well and good to share your pronouns and wear a rainbow pin, but what really makes the biggest difference to inclusion at Metcash is being empowered and confident to call out behaviors that are damaging to individuals. So I'm hoping maybe while I'm chatting away, Lucas might be able to share a couple of links in the chat about the reporting options available to you at Metcash, as I know you have a really robust system of anonymous reporting, conversations with HR, there's LGBTQ trained grievance officers, and you also have confidential contacts who are trained to have a less formal chat with you if you see or hear something that doesn't sit right with you, but you're not sure how to action it. So I'll put a bit of information in the chat about that as well. So on to why LGBTQ plus inclusion is so important. Sexual orientation and gender identity apply to 100% of the human race. Everyone on planet Earth has a sexual orientation and gender identity. But what's happened over time is because the majority of people have a sexual orientation of being straight or heterosexual, and their experience with gender is a cisgender experience, which means that the sex recorded for them at birth aligns with the gender that they identify as today. Because we'll know for sure after the next census, but because about 89% of the population fall within this bucket of being cisgender and heterosexual, the other 11% of people, which is the LGBTQIA plus community, have been made to feel othered. We're often asked to, or feel like we have to for our safety, or actually legislated to by the governments and communities that we operate in to keep these core parts of who we are hidden. And look, for some of you on the call, you might think, oh, well, that's not that hard. How often do I bring up that I'm straight? But let's stop and think about that for a moment. As a heterosexual person, you are able to date, kiss, hook up with, marry, have kids with, divorce, anyone you like. You can get engaged and you can come to the office and you can celebrate that engagement. You can wear your engagement ring. You can get married anywhere in the world. You can go on your honeymoon anywhere in the world. You could start a family and nobody would gossip or scrutinize you for that. You can hold hands with your partner walking down the street. You could have a little kiss as you pop them into a taxi on the way to the airport and not fear violence. These simple privileges are not afforded to LGBTQIA plus people. And that's why I'm here to help try and break down those barriers and stigmas and create a safer culture for LGBTQIA plus people, both in the workplace and beyond. So these next few slides, I'll be talking to some statistics around the current climate for LGBTQIA plus workers in Australia. Now, I want to put a little asterisk next to this before we get started in saying that this data is taken from Pride and Diversity member organisations. So, if anything, these results are positively skewed. So, even from the cream of the crop, even from Australian employers that have a partnership with us, that have established Pride networks, that invest in Pride inclusion, these are the numbers, and they're not good. Over the last 5 years, we have seen a steady decline in the number of LGBTQIA plus Australians who are out to all or out to most of their colleagues at work. From 2020 to now, we've seen a 10% decline in the number of queer people out to their colleagues. And out of those employees who are out at work, almost 1 in 10 report being bullied or harassed at work because of their diverse sexuality. Out of that 9%, over half didn't feel safe to report it. So, why is that? Why are queer Australians still being persecuted while at work, despite the Anti Discrimination Act, despite the Sex Discrimination Act, despite all these organisations having bullying and harassment policies and code of conduct policies and pride inclusion training? It's still going on. Homophobia and transphobia is still far too prevalent in the Australian workplace. And if we look at the numbers for respondents of diverse gender, so the previous slide was talking to diverse sexuality, which is lesbian, gay, and bisexual respondents. This slide is talking to diverse gender. So while the good news story is that more and more Australians are out and open as gender diverse in the workplace, which is great. We've seen a 12% increase since 2020. With increased visibility, there are still very, very high rates of transphobia, with 16% reporting they'd been bullied or harassed while at work because of their diverse gender, and half of those respondents did not feel safe or empowered to report it. Those statistics are pretty alarming, considering I would still rather be queer here than just about anywhere else in the world right now.
Absolutely.
Now, what I want to talk to next is the concept of being LGBTQ as being an invisible, stigmatized identity. Now, it's invisible because, unlike other diversities, like perhaps, our skin color or the language that we speak, there are diversities that we're not able to conceal. But our sexual orientation and gender identity are, at great personal expense, able to be concealed. So we call it invisible. But they're stigmatized. We don't use straight as an insult, do we, in Australia? There's a lot, because this call is being recorded, I'm not going to provide examples, but think to a very recent scandal in the AFL. There are lots of words that are used here in Australia, colloquially and otherwise, where we use LGBTQIA identities as an insult. Even the phrase, I'm thinking back to high school, oh, that's so gay, and using gay as a negative. Why are we doing that? It's because queer identities are stigmatized. They have historically been a criminal offence in Australia. In fact, Tasmania was the last state to decriminalise homosexuality, and that was in 1997. And then it took another 20 years to 2017 for us to achieve marriage equality. But I'm putting little asterisks on that because queer couples still do not have the same access to marriage as straight couples. Yes, we are able to have a legal union, but there are still religious exemptions which allow religious institutions to deny marrying a queer couple. So even though we have made great advancements, there are still very large gaps in safety and privilege for LGBTQ people versus non-LGBTQ people. Now, because of this history and ongoing stigma linked to our identities, Queer people are very, very careful about when we reveal our diverse sexuality or gender. So I'm going to use myself as an example here. So I am an openly bisexual cisgender woman. I have been out in all of my workplaces since I was 15, pretty much. And as soon as I found out the right word for it. And I am very aware of my privilege in being able to do so in the communities I grew up in and the workplaces I've worked in. But even though I have spent almost all of my life out and open, I still am very careful about who I reveal my sexual orientation to. And this is because despite having a relatively, safe journey through life, I have experienced biphobia. I have had to leave a workplace because of biphobic and sexual harassment issues. And I still to this day will scan pretty much every environment I enter just to check how myself I can be in that environment. So this continuous scanning, I'm looking for signs of inclusion. I'm looking for, maybe a welcome here sticker on the door. I'm looking for in email correspondence, does this person share their pronouns or do they have, a rainbow badge or something in their email signature? Even when I'm looking at restaurants or if I'm looking at nightclubs or hotels and I'm booking on websites, I have a bit of a scan. Okay, what kind of venue am I going to? Is this somewhere that's queer friendly or am I unsure? And I'm very hypersensitive to these cues, both the presence of them, but also the absence of them. And when I don't see any signs of inclusion for the queer community, it reinforces that fear that, okay, maybe I'm not safe here. So I want you to have a think about at Metcash and your particular workplace, because I know that you're a very dispersed organization. Are you in a shop front? Are you in head office or are you working at some sort of other remote site, maybe a warehouse or something like that? But what signs are there in your workplace to signal to staff, customers, and stakeholders that, yeah, you're safe here? Do we have signs of inclusivity? Are you able to wear rainbow shoelaces or a rainbow lanyard? Or is there a rainbow insignia on your badge, for example? It doesn't have to be much, but those small visible signs really do make a phenomenal difference to LGBTQ plus people's sense of inclusion, safety, and belonging at your organization. And look, I said we're pretty, us rainbow folk, we're pretty hypersensitive. We can spot a rainbow from space. But if there are no signs of inclusivity and we enter a non-inclusive workplace, there are some pretty serious outcomes. Now, look, some of these are going to be very obvious. If I'm working somewhere that's got homophobic, transphobic, or biphobic behaviors prevalent in the workplace, there's a risk to health and well-being. There's a risk to your organization's culture of respect and inclusion. There's a risk to your organization's reputation. You're going to get a bad rap. LGBTQ plus people are going to stop applying with you. This will therefore have an impact on your talent pipeline. You're going to start getting the same sort of people apply over and over and over again. You're going to lose that richness of diversity and the benefits that come with having a diverse workforce. There is a risk to duty of care, which, if anyone on the call works in HR or management, this can lead to law cases, Fair Work, the Human Rights Commission. There are financial implications to the business for being non inclusive. And also, people are going to leave. And when I'm talking about higher staff turnover, it's not just LGBTQ plus people who will leave your organization, but those who love us, our allies, particularly rainbow parents, that is the parents of LGBTQIA plus young people are not going to feel safe either, and they'll be looking for new employment as well. So it's not just the 11% that I mentioned. It's not just the LGBTQIA plus employees who are affected by homophobic, transphobic, and biphobic behaviours. Our allies and those who love us are also deeply affected by these poor behaviours. So it's really something to think about, that creating a safe, psychologically safe workplace for queer folk, it's not just for us. There's a far larger percentage of your workforce who will benefit from signs of inclusion at Metcash. And the final point I wanted to make here is around diminished team cohesion and diminished productivity and engagement. Now, I've mentioned a few times, sort of the effort that it takes LGBTQ plus people to conceal their diverse sexuality and diverse gender, to self-edit or to remain in the closet. If I joined Metcash and I'm not feeling safe and I'm not bringing my whole self to work, what's it going to look like? I'm not going to be engaging in conversation with my peers. I'm going to be standoffish. I'm going to keep to myself. I'm probably going to have higher sick leave. I'm probably going to work from home as often as I can to minimize exposure to my colleagues and that risk of letting it slip. And how my team is going to receive this is basically, well, what's Nita's problem, right? She's so unfriendly. She's so standoffish. She's never here. What does she even do? And it really starts to affect the productivity and cohesion of the team as a whole. So again, being an LGBTQ inclusive workplace, it's not just to benefit your queer staff. It's actually for the benefit of everyone that we can turn up, be fully ourselves, and be fully focused on the task at hand, not wasting time and energy making sure we don't let slip our partner's name or where we went on the weekend or what we did and with who. It's for everyone's benefit that we're able to bring our whole selves to work. So look, we're halfway through the session, folks. I know there's a lot of us on the call, so I was wondering if you'd feel comfortable using the chat function just to share in a sentence or two, perhaps some examples of where you have seen LGBTQ inclusion done well, or maybe some examples of where it hasn't been done so well. I'll read out a couple of them, like I'll give you time to digest. But if you're comfortable to use the chat and pop in a little anecdote, or if you would like to come off mute and pop your hand up, it would be great to hear from you and just provide some context for the subject. I, for one, thinking back to some previous employers, have got some examples from, those doing it well and those who aren't. For example, I at a previous employer, it was a financial institution, and they claimed to be LGBTQ inclusive, but it was very, very hard to get funding or buy-in for any events. So us LGBTQ staff would often get together and we had a little pride network and we did some social stuff ourselves, but we didn't have that organizational buy-in. And it really, really negatively affected my perception of the organization when we had a couple of pride flags around the office, a poster on pronouns and a few little bits and pieces. But when we had a delegate from one of our customer companies come through, who was from quite a conservative, religious-led organization, we were told to take everything down. So just because we had this one guest in the office who held conservative views, we were told, just to keep them happy, let's make sure all of the pride stuff is taken down from the office. And that felt really, really, really demoralizing. And it felt like rainbow washing. to us at that organization. I mean, sure, you can understand that, right? Like, if if your organization is going to commit to LGBTQ inclusion, we need to make sure we're doing it all year round. It's not just during Pride Month. It's not just when we can, when we can toot our own horn about it. It's something we should be doing 24/7. Conversely, though, thankfully Bridget has shared a much more positive story where at their last employer, the organization actually had a float in Mardi Gras parade. And isn't that such a fantastic, like, organizational commitment to showing to the whole world, broadcasting to the whole world that, hey, this place is committed to queer inclusion. Thank you for sharing, Bridget. So look, this next section, we're now going into, please keep those comments coming in the chat, by the way. This next section, I'm going to talk through correct and current terminology for the LGBTQ community. I just want to preface this by saying that there is a developing language in this space, and I'm not going to pretend that this list is exhaustive, but I'm hoping that it provides you with some key definitions and just a better understanding of what these identities mean. I also just want to let you know that why I'm using, for the most part, the shorter acronym LGBTQ, which is lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, and queer, is because at Pride in Diversity, our current survey data only collects information on these pockets of the rainbow community. We are hoping to expand this to the ace or asexual community. And as I'll get to shortly, the intersex community has their own advocacy groups. I'll provide you their details if you'd like to learn more, of course. But basically, please carry on using whichever version of the acronym works for you. I would, outside of work, say LGBTQIA+, or the rainbow community or the queer community. But for the purpose of the training, I'll be just using LGBTQ. All right. So to set the scene, I talked at the start about how about 89% of the population follow the storyline you see on screen, which is, in fancy terms, the heteronormative binary. In layman's terms, the Barbie and Ken story. So for most people, the storyline will go something like this. However, we know that this isn't everybody's experience. And over the next few slides, I'm going to add in the LGBTQIA plus community, and you'll see how actually all of us have these key human characteristics of sex recorded at birth, gender identity, gender expression, and sexual orientation. It's just that we've got more than two options. So I'll start with sex recorded at birth. So I've never given birth myself. I did watch a very confronting video in year 10 biology though, and in that video it did not look very scientific. Basically, baby is born, the doctor takes a look and says, congratulations on your baby, boy or girl, and you will be assigned an M or F on your birth certificate for male or female. But what we know is that there is a percentage of the population who are born with intersex variations. And intersex people are born with physical sex characteristics that do not fit the medical norms for female or male bodies. The interesting thing about the intersex community is they themselves are hugely diverse. There's over 40 different underlying variations known to science, and these variations may become apparent at different life stages. What I mean by that is, for some people, it's picked up prenatally through the use of genetic screening technologies or at birth. For others, it might be in early childhood. Your intersex variation may be picked up accidentally in some other kind of medical exam. Puberty may not go as planned and it's revealed then or even later in life when trying to conceive. It's even possible to go your whole life and not know that you have an intersex variation. Now, the intersex community, as I mentioned earlier, have their own community advocacy groups. The websites are on screen.
I'm running out of battery.
Oh, Sorry, I think someone just came off mute.
Sorry.
Okay. All good. I hope your battery's okay. um, so, yeah, sorry, as I was saying, the websites you see on screen here, I would really encourage you to visit them and do some, extra education. The intersex community has requested that beyond providing a definition, that we leave any further community advocacy to them, nothing about us without us. So I'll be leaving my explanation there. But another piece of further learning that I found really helpful was the ABC's You Can't Ask That series episode on intersex people. It's free on ABC iView. Perhaps someone might like to pop it in the chat for the benefit of the group. But it's the 25-minute episode where a panel of intersex people are interviewed about their experience. And I found it very, very humbling, to be honest. I was extremely naive to the unique challenges and barriers faced by intersex people. So I'd really encourage you to watch that episode, maybe on the train home tonight or on your lunch break, and just learn a little bit more about intersex folk, because they've definitely got unique challenges and barriers that are completely different to the rest of the queer community. Thanks, folks who have to jump off to another meeting. I really appreciate you coming along. So moving on to gender identity. Now, I did explain what a cisgender experience was a little earlier in the call. A cisgender experience is when the sex recorded for you at birth aligns with the gender that you identify as today. So I've had a cisgender experience. I was assigned female at birth and I identify as a woman. However, that's not everyone's experience with gender. A transgender experience is when the person has an incongruence or mismatch between the sex recorded for them at birth and how they identify. And the transgender or trans community has a developing language to describe their experience. In Australia, non-binary does seem to be one of the more common ones, and I'm noticing it more and more on forms and, like government forms, but even, booking restaurants or booking your hairdresser or whatever it might be, which is fantastic. But there are some other terms you might come across, such as genderqueer, gender fluid, or bigender, that have a similar meaning. And I just want to let you know that these terms are completely respectful. And if someone feels safe enough to share these identities with you, first of all, congratulations on being a safe place. I mean, you must be doing something right in the allyship world. But more so that you don't need to be an expert, you just need to be respectful. Agender is a slightly different term, so I'm just going to explain what that means for a moment. Agender means that the person does not experience gender. One of my colleagues is agender and they describe themselves as a bag of bones. So whereas non-binary, genderqueer or gender fluid have more of a connotation of not aligning with either gender of man or woman, or maybe a combination of both, or moving between the two, agender is the absence of a gender identity. Just wanted to explain that one. And for most trans people, they will go through an affirmation journey. Some of you may be more familiar with the term transition, like to gender transition or transitioning gender. Look, that term is a bit outdated now, and it also has quite a dark past, particularly when it comes to like how it's been pathologized in the medical world. The medical community and trans community have collectively agreed on the term affirmation moving forward, as it's far more positive. To affirm your gender really means to step into that which you know to be true for yourself. So a key takeaway from today for us allies on the call who have had a cisgender experience is to upgrade our language to use the term affirmation moving forward. Now, the gender affirmation process could include 1 or 5 or all of the steps you see on screen here. There is no right or wrong way to do it. And for every trans person, Their affirmation journey is unique to them. And there are also practical barriers, such as where you live, uh, cost, time, and how supportive your community is in how an individual might engage with the steps you see on screen here. So, social affirmation looks like publicly changing your name, your pronouns, or your appearance. Social affirmation is definitely the most accessible step in the affirmation process, as in, anyone really can go out and change their hair and makeup or, change their pronouns on Teams. But despite it being the most accessible, it is where a lot of trans and gender diverse people experience the highest rates of bullying and harassment and violence. If you work with someone who is affirming their gender or has affirmed their gender, please be supportive. Please avoid curiosity questions. And remember, I know it's very old fashioned advice, but if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it. We want to be very supportive of our trans and gender diverse colleagues, friends, and loved ones, as unfortunately statistics show that they are very likely to encounter bullying and harassment, ostracization, or violence and victimization during this process. So don't pile on. Be one of the good ones and be kind and supportive during this time. To medically affirm your gender may include taking hormones, having surgery, which can include gender affirming surgeries like top or bottom surgery. Medical affirmation is not part of everyone's story, though. Don't fall into that pitfall of thinking that all trans people must want to or have had medical affirmation. It's quite simply not true. For example, I have a colleague who's non binary, and their affirmation journey was to change their name and their pronouns and their dress sense a little bit. And that was it. They felt completely affirmed in those steps. And that's no less valid than another trans person who might go through all the steps you see on screen here. Legal affirmation is where you change your gender marker on your birth certificate and can therefore change your legal documents like driver's license, passport, Medicare, any qualifications you might hold, like degrees, licensing tickets, that kind of thing. Could even be a boat license or a gun license or something like that. The legal affirmation step is actually quite arduous and expensive. I mean, I don't know if any of you have had the displeasure of dealing with Centrelink or any other government bodies, but that step can actually be really time consuming and a real barrier for folks as well. So, what I am hoping to achieve by sharing this information with you is that for trans and gender diverse people, the gender affirmation process is a vulnerable time. As I stated earlier, if you know someone who's going through this journey, whether it's at work or in your personal life, please be supportive. Please respect their chosen name and pronouns, and offer support. And it may require some time off to complete some of this, some of the things you see on screen here. Let's be accommodating, as this is a vulnerable time for folks. Before I move on, did anyone have any questions? You can come off mute or use the chat function around the terminology on screen here or the gender affirmation process. I will be sharing my details at the end if you have a question you'd prefer to take offline. But I just hope this has expanded your knowledge of the trans and gender diverse community and will empower you to have, empower you to upskill those around you moving forward. Now, gender expression is a funny one, right? Because we have collectively as a society put a pink and a blue sticker on just about everything. I'm not just talking about getting your nails done or makeup or hair length or, dresses versus pants. I'm not just talking about that. I'm talking about the music we listen to, the way we express ourselves with our hands, the pitch of our voice, the sports we play, the TV shows we watch and enjoy. There are so many things that we as a society has deemed to be for the boys and for the girls. And it is all made up. It also has changed over time. If we go back not even 200 years, men wore high heels, men had long hair, they wore wigs, they wore makeup. But over time that's changed because it's not real. It's all made up. And as it turns out, nail polish is for fingernails and earrings are for ears. And anyone can watch RuPaul's Drag Race. It's a great show. The thing about gender expression is we make a lot of assumptions about people's sexual orientation and gender identity based on how they express themselves. And as allies to the LGBTQ community, we're going to try to be less presumptuous about people's sexual orientation and gender identity based on how they look. We're going to try not to judge a book by its cover and also create space for people to express themselves in a way that makes them feel good. As long as we're adhering to Metcash's, sort of safety protocols and dress for your day dress code, anyone should be allowed to wear whatever makes them feel good about themselves, their identity, and their gender identity. And then finally, sexual orientation. So I hope we're all pretty confident in what straight means. Straight or heterosexual, being only attracted to the opposite gender to yourself. Lesbian and gay, what they have in common, homosexual, is being only attracted to the same gender as yourself. Bisexual and pansexual are a little bit different in that these identities are attracted to more than one gender. So while they sit under the same umbrella as being multi-gender attracted, there is a bit of a difference in the terms, which I'll explain briefly, as you may not have come across it before. So bisexual people, such as myself, are sexually attracted to more than one gender. There's a bit of a misconception that that always means men and women. And look, bi does mean two, so I understand why people's minds go there. But bisexual really means more than one. So for some people, it might be that, oh, I'm attracted to women and trans and non-binary people. Or it might be that I'm attracted to men and women. Or like me, I'm sexually attracted to all genders. But the difference is bisexual people are attracted to more than one gender, but still do view people in a gendered way. Whereas pansexual people are sexually attracted to folks regardless of gender. Gender is not a factor. Essentially, you're hot or you're not. It's a subtle difference. And again, you don't need to be an expert, but I'm just hoping that explains those difference in terms in case you ever come across someone who identifies as such. And then the final term I wanted to talk about was asexual. So asexual, or ACE for short, is the A you see in the longer version of the LGBTQIA+ acronym. Asexual folk rarely, if ever, experience sexual attraction. What do I mean by that? So for the rest of us on the call who have a different sexual orientation, I'm sure at some point in your life, you have either been minding your business at a cafe or you might have been watching a movie or whatever it is, and you see someone who makes you think, whoa, you experience lust, you experience a rush of sexual attraction. It happens to me every time Pedro Pascal comes on the screen. Guilty. But that is not experienced by asexual people. Some ace folk do develop sexual attraction after a long, platonic friendship with someone. Uh, there are pockets of the asexual community who are in relationships or who have experienced it in their life, but it's not something that they experience regularly, and certainly not, at the drop of a hat. You know that expression, love at first sight? Well, we know it's not love, but that feeling would not be experienced by ace people. And what a lot of ace people report in coming out is that they're really invalidated. Because asexual identities aren't as sort of well known and well understood as others you see on screen here, often they're met with a lot of really rude questions or even completely dismissed. So, for example, some asexual people say, oh, look, I came out to a colleague and they asked me, oh, so what does that mean? You've never had sex. Are you a virgin? Like, that's a really inappropriate question that you would not ask someone who came out as any other identity, right? So, as allies to the asexual community, if someone does feel safe enough to disclose that diverse sexuality with you, please, please be supportive. Please do not question or invalidate their sexual orientation. Asexuality is just as valid as everything else you see on screen here. And saying something like, thank you so much for sharing that with me. Is there anything I can do to better support you? Would be a great way to, create dialogue or create space to learn a bit more about their experience. But just remember that nobody owes you their life story, and everyone's sexual orientation, whether it be heterosexual, straight, gay, or ace, you know, everyone's sexual orientation is equally valid and deserves the same level of respect and privacy. So look, Barbie and Ken are still there. I've gone and added in the other 11% to that slide we saw a few minutes ago. And as you can see, all of us, non-LGBTQ and LGBTQ, we all have these core human characteristics. We all have a sex recorded at birth, an experience with gender. We express our gender in some way or another, and we have a sexual orientation. But isn't the page so much more colourful when we include everyone? I'm hoping that these last few slides have helped to kind of break down that perception of them versus us. The 89% versus the 11%. It's not about that. We're all human with equally valid human experiences. And I also just want to leave you with this, that any combination of the things you see on screen here are equally valid. So we may have someone who was assigned male at birth, they identify as non binary, they express their gender in a more masculine way, maybe short haircut, maybe a moustache, maybe they wear jeans a lot, whatever, and they identify as gay. Or someone who was assigned female at birth, identify as a woman, dress very androgynously, and identify as straight. All of these realms don't influence one another, and all combinations are valid. So, in these last few minutes, I just want to reiterate what you can do going forward to be a better, more visible, and vocal ally to the LGBTQIA plus community. Step one, being informed. Look, you've already done it. You've came to my training today. Again, I want to apologize for running a few minutes late. The battle of the meeting rooms around here. But by coming to sessions like this and just expanding your knowledge, empowering yourself to have conversations with friends and family about the queer community, that is allyship in action. You could also follow some LGBTQ related publications or accounts. ABC Queer is really good, but there's other websites like Pink News, or you could follow ACON, ACON, Pride in Diversity, or Equality Australia, Diversity Council of Australia. There's lots of fantastic organisations out there. Follow a couple on LinkedIn or on Instagram, and this education will come to you. Being visible, you've probably seen me fiddling with my lanyard this whole time because I can see my pins are back to front. But yeah, I'll flip it around. That's better. Um, if you're able to, in a line with personal protective wear in your line of business, if you're able to visibly, outwardly show that you're a rainbow ally, you might have rainbow shoelaces, a pin, a lanyard, a hair tie. There might be something on your t-shirt, whatever it is. These are really powerful ways just to signal that you're a safe space. You don't have to be an expert and know everything and know every terminology inside out. It's just about saying, hey, whoever you are, you can be yourself with me. And then finally, be part of the solution. This is the slightly harder part, but if you witness homophobic, transphobic, or biphobic behaviors in the workplace or hopefully beyond, please call it out, or it might be a matter of calling in. What I mean by that is there might be people in our lives, looking at you, Grandpa, who use outdated and offensive language without realizing that it's harmful. And because you've gone and done this hours training session and you know what to say and you know what the correct and current terminology is, maybe you could have a conversation with that person and say, hey, look, I know you're trying to be funny, but that word's actually pretty offensive these days. You could say this. If you witness something that is bullying and harassment, Metcash has a variety of reporting options available to you. You can reach out to members of your Pride network if you need support in, you don't know where to go. And I will also share my personal contact details. That's not me in the picture, but they're my contact details. Reach out to me and I can help you navigate it. Because even if you can't be an upstander in the moment, please don't walk by it because that's where real change happens. So they're my details, nmanneringacon.org.au. I'll pop it in the chat as well. If you have a shower thought or a question you'd like to take offline, please do get in touch. Otherwise, I'll hang back for a few minutes in case you have questions or queries, and I'll hand back to you, Lucas. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nita. That was great. Team, as Nita mentioned, we're going to stay back for a few minutes just in case anyone has additional questions. If not, you're free to go. And thank you again, Nita.
Thank you for having me, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you for the lovely comments in the chat, folks.